Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. If any of you know anything about me, then you'll know that I love bicycles. I think cycling is an excellent solution for our modern living, for our urban lifestyles nowadays. And actually, I quite marvel at bikes. I think they're quite amazing machines. They're so simple, yet they're so effective. They're simple because it's a machine that's just made out of a frame with a few cogs and sprockets on it, a chain, handlebars, and a couple of wheels. But it allows you to go at such thrilling speeds. But bikes are not just about speed, they're also a powerful tool for transforming our communities. Recently, I went to visit Utrecht, which is in the Netherlands. I spent a weekend there and I cycled round and I saw that this city is proof of how the humble bicycle can solve many of the problems that we face in our societies, in our cities nowadays. Many of us are already aware of the fact that in the Netherlands they have a bike-centric approach, that bicycles are at the heart of getting around, of their transport solutions. And many of us simply assume that this has always been the case. We probably assume that the bike-centric approach organically grew with the development of the bicycle over the years. So we almost might think that since the invention of the wheel, the Dutch have been good at using their bicycles to get around. But that is actually false. In the 1950s, the Dutch embraced the motor car, like in many other European countries. The motor car was seen as the solution for comfort and ease of living in our modern societies. And the Dutch even started to demolish some cycle infrastructure. They started to remove cycle lanes in order to make space for more cars, because that was supposedly the solution. And what was the consequence? Well, it's quite predictable, really. These cities became clogged up. There was a lot of congestion. People were choking on the fumes that the cars were producing. But worse than all of this was the fact that there was a steep rise in the number of road deaths. In 1971, there were 3,000 deaths a year on Dutch roads. More than 400 of these deaths were children. And that was what really caused anger among the Dutch people. Many were furious at the fact that they had to sacrifice the lives of their children just to get around in a more comfortable way. So many took to the streets. There were many protests which were held, and people called for safer streets. They demanded change from the government. At first, there were no big changes, unfortunately. But then in 1973, another factor came along. This was the oil crisis. The protests on the street hadn't been enough to convince the Dutch government to change, but the fact that the country needed to save fuel meant that the authorities brought in measures to cut down on fuel consumption and to promote other forms of transport. One measure that was started was car-free Sundays. On car-free Sundays, as you may know, there are certain parts of a city which are shut down to motorized traffic, and you can only get around by foot, by bike, or maybe by skating around. And these car-free Sundays reminded the Dutch of what they had lost. They were reminded that they had lost the peace and quiet of their cities. They had lost a sense of community. So gradually, in Utrecht, they started to build cycle lanes, and in 1 year, in Utrecht and the surrounding areas, the road space available for cycling rose by a staggering 75%. The project was so successful and that the government decided to roll it out nationwide. They saw that all they needed to do was simply to make enough space on the road for cyclists, and people would need no other encouragement. You didn't need to offer a scheme paying people to cycle. You didn't have to offer people free bicycles. You simply have to make cycling safe and give people the space to cycle, and they will take to their bikes on their own. Unsurprisingly, there was a very large drop in the number of deaths on the roads, and particularly child deaths dropped significantly. In 1971, there were 400 child deaths, as I mentioned, and in 2010, there were only 14. Over the years, the Netherlands developed innovative infrastructure and cycling schemes, and the aim was to put people at the center of urban planning. I'll tell you a bit more about Utrecht and the Netherlands in general, and cycling and how it was developed over the years, but for now we'll take a short break and we'll be back in a few minutes. Thank you.